Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back to another episode. It is March. We are careening toward April and the playoffs, and I'm slightly sleep deprived today. I have no idea what is going on. My technical settings are all off. No one wants to hear this. Cody, how you doing?
Good. I mean, it's March, like you said. We're down to the last. How many days are left now? We're not quite 2 weeks away. Probably like 2.5 weeks till the play-in, playoffs type of stuff. I don't know about you, Ben, but I find this to be the. I think I said this last time, and I was like, "Hey, this is kind of the time of the year where I start feeling like the season should be shorter." And there was one person in the comments that was like, "I don't know." They were like, "Hey, I this is one of those things I look forward to so much every day. Like I feel." Almost like happy for you that you can step away from it. Now I gotta say, I appreciate that level of sickodom that you're still like, yes, the end of the year, March. This is the regular season I like to watch because I don't know about you, but I am certainly ready for the playoffs, like more than ever. Like, let's get this going, Ben. Let's just go.
Well, my head's spinning in March. I don't know what to make of anything. Like, take the Lakers. Mm-hmm. In the month of March, the Lakers were like, are they actually very, very good? Is their defense very good? They're the best defense in the league for like an entire month block. And now we're still in the month of March, and the Lakers, are they falling apart? Is their defense falling apart? Now, we talked about their defense a few episodes back, and we've done some content on it, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball for members as well. And one of the things that we looked at after a few more games offline was their shooting luck. And it turns out that, yes, of course, they have a lot of shooting luck during this run. And now when we come back, like the shooting luck is swinging in the other direction. Teams are making shots. The Lakers are daring teams to make shots. And I think it's a huge deal to be like, oh yeah, they had the best defense in the league, but they weren't with Oklahoma City. They weren't with Orlando. They weren't one of the top defenses. But I'm looking at them going, man, if you can go into the playoffs and you're like a top 10, top 12 defense, like you can actually be slightly above average on defense and defend well, and you create matchup problems for teams. They did such a great job in the Denver game, and Denver's offense has been off the charts in the last few months with Nikola Jokic. Like, that's a game changer for the Lakers. But now we're still in March, and I'm like, well, the Lakers, they have a bottom 5 defense. What's going on?
Well, okay, let me ask. I don't know how much you watched during that 2-week span, but LeBron did miss 2 straight weeks of basketball action for them, right? I don't know how many games that equated to, but even since he returned, Ben, like shocking numbers here. In their loss to Chicago, he had a negative 27 game plus minus. And I know you're not supposed to use game level data when it comes to like plus minus stuff, but being negative 27 for LeBron was shocking. Follows it up with a negative 17 against Orlando. They allowed Orlando Magic to score 118 points. Like, I didn't even know that was possible. Like, I thought that actually counts as 2 losses at that point if the Magic can score more than 115 points against you. That Chicago game was interesting because it was somewhat of a close game for the first half, but it was in that second half, that third and fourth quarter, where the floodgates just opened up and the Bulls just like, I don't know, they were unstoppable in that second half there. So I'm not sure if you've noticed anything that seems different. I don't know if you think it's just the luck, or I don't know if you think it's LeBron's absence and then coming back and getting himself into it. Is it some combination of those three? Like, what's going on here, Ben?
No, that's what I'm saying. It could be all of those things. It could be all of the above. It could be some of the above. This is why I think this has been one of the great NBA regular seasons in history, because in addition to the high quality play, the twists and turns of the season, Cody, just from one month to the next month. And March is always a little weird, right? Like, teams get to the end of the bench and players are injured. And if you're at the bottom of the league, you want to bring your rookies and sophomores along, and you're calling up your G League guys to get them minutes. This is, by the way, this is not the only sport that does this. Baseball, the end of the year, you bring up your minor leaguers. Cody, baseball's the one where they have a bat and they stand at home plate and they try to hit the pitcher who throws them. Don't look at me quizzically like that.
Cricket? Are you describing cricket?
Yes, exactly. It's very similar to cricket. So March has always had this element to it that I think we're seeing right now. But man, this March is just reflecting the vagaries of the season where, you don't know what's happening from one night to the next. One team's coming out of nowhere. It's been very, very exciting to watch, but I'm also just like, we have other teams that I want to ask you about. Chicago's one of them. But I mean, the Lakers are just a natural place to start because even LeBron with his groin injury at 40, does he need a month to come back? I mean, when you're a certain aged man, Cody, in life, with small injuries that can add up, sometimes getting out of bed can be hard. So I'm just saying, I don't know what to make of a lot of what's happening right now, including the Chicago Bulls, who, I mean, what have they won, like 9 out of 12 games or something? The Bulls are coming for the 6th spot.
I'm going to take a Jim Corner detour for a second, because as a
Jim Corner? Who's
Jim
he?
Corner, a detour to Jim Corner right now.
You mean working out GYM?
Yeah. What you like, Slim Jim Corner? Like, I
was thinking of like, Jim Brewer, somebody named Jim.
Jim Brewer once opened up a Metallica concert I went to, and they waited an hour and a half over their start time. And let me tell you, I was really sick of Jim Brewer at that point. That was a lot of Jim Brewer before a Metallica concert. Anyway, what I was going to say, Jim Corner, actually going back to the gym, it's one of those things where, like, I haven't played basketball as much as I would like the past year or so. And I didn't realize that jumping is one of those things that if you do less and less, you like lose it. And so when I was younger, like, let's say I'm the young 20s, I always thought box jumps were kind of dumb, right? I just didn't see the point. But now I'm like, oh, I should probably do box jumps every once in a while so my body like knows how to jump a little bit without putting too much stress on it. And, I'm not 40 years old. I'm not LeBron James. I'm also not a professional athlete. So maybe you have a point there. Like, maybe you need to reintegrate into the NBA. So a little severance talk in my head right there. I guess I'm using the term reintegration to talk about coming back from injury. My mind's all over the place.
What is going on right now? This is a spoiler-free zone. You can't just throw words around like that.
They've been talking about reintegration since like season 1. Like,
what about the people who haven't seen season 1? What about the Warriors out there who want to wait and watch the entire package in its entirety, binge style, the way it should be done?
I promise you that saying the word reintegration is not a spoiler. That's as much of a spoiler as being like Smoke Monster for Lost. Like, it's not a spoiler. It's just something that pops up.
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I haven't seen Lost.
Where are we? What are we talking about? So we're talking.
We're lost. That's where we are. You took us to the gym. We haven't figured out why. Something about March.
No, I think you're completely right about LeBron. Like, I want to wait for the Lakers. Like, they're one of the teams that I'm honestly waiting for the playoffs to see how much I should take what's going on with them seriously, which kind of makes me want to like take a step back for a more thousand-eye view, Ben. Just in general, you've been watching the NBA for a long time, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. It's embarrassing at this point.
Do you feel like there's something about March that is indicative going into the playoffs? Like, if there's something with this final stretch before we actually get to the playoffs where you're like, you know what, this is meaningful going into the second season.
Yes, but there's a little bit of a preseason thing going on where there's a signal, but there's more noise. And I think that's the easiest way to describe it, right? There's still signals that matter, but there's also more noise to sift through. So, the 2018 Philadelphia 76ers, they have this great run. I think that was the year they had this huge run at the end of the year. They finished with like 50 wins. I think Embiid was injured for some of that, and that was Ben Simmons. Hey, remember Ben Simmons? Ben Simmons was just, leading the young charging 76ers into the playoffs. They win the first round. They're favored over the Celtics in the second round. They end up losing that series to an older Celtics team, and Al Horford, Sage Wizard Al Horford, the Embiid stopper of the time. So there's plenty of examples like this where teams get hot or turn a corner or a player comes on in February and March. And I think it's very legitimate. And that's the signal part. So the Spurs, I want to say in like 2012, I think they had like a 20-game winning streak going back into the regular season and into the playoffs, and then ended up ultimately losing to Oklahoma City in the conference finals. The Orlando Magic one year with Dwight Howard had a huge winning streak, and that carried them to at least the conference finals. So there's a lot going on, I think, in terms of legitimate historical examples of teams making pushes at the end of the year. The 2008 Lakers, when they got Pau Gasol, the 1969 New York Knicks. I mean, you were dating me about watching for a long time. I probably should have mentioned a more recent contemporary year. They made a great Dave DeBusschere trade back in the day, and February and March. Just actually, the dates would have been shifted back then. I think they played the finals in like April, but you get what I'm saying. The end of the season does bring some legitimacy, but it also brings noise. And that's where it's just like fascinating trying to see some of these teams and players, young players. We have players I want to ask you about. But like, how much of it is real? Quentin Grimes, Cody, how much of it is real? Have you checked in yet? Have another week has gone by? Have you seen the Quentin Grimes experience?
I did. Something that really that got me excited when I was watching. I don't remember who it was that they were playing, but it wasn't just the shooting stroke. I was kind of expecting to go in and check him out and be like, oh, this dude's just like hitting a bunch of threes. But it was the decisiveness off the bounce. Like, I was like, wow, I don't remember seeing you just like attack so quickly. And he was quick. Like, he was a lot quicker going like off the dribble than I remember. And that's the kind of stuff when I see it, I'm like, oh, that'll carry with you. It's not just a hot shooting streak. Like, if you have those kinds of skills, that's going to carry you through. And I don't know. I really hope we get like a full strength 76ers. I'm not giving up on Embiid just yet. Like, Maxey is still a very good player. Next year, like, there's a chance. And obviously we say this about a bunch of teams, but the 76ers are interesting in that sense, but I'm more interested in them in terms of looking to the future, right? So Grimes is interesting, but because of the playoffs and like my focus going on that, I just haven't checked in with the 76ers more than a cursory glance or two.
In the last 12 games, Grimes is averaging 28 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, 5 assists as well, shooting 40% on threes, 9 threes a game. It's absolutely remarkable. Of course, the team is getting killed. They get outscored by about 9 points per game when he's on. They have won 3 of those games and been very competitive in others. But, if we took a future-facing lens, to your point, I think this is a really interesting kind of question for March. Do we get unreasonably excited about yet another talent? Jared McCain came on and emerged as a rookie. He's going to have an offseason and be in his second year, knock on wood, health permitting. And then you get someone like Quentin Grimes coming in. This is yet another potential person who could person. He's another potential player who could break out, right? Or how much do we actually expect something like this to carry over to a higher quality team? He's not going to be the first option. I don't think he's going to be the second option, but does he have more tertiary responsibility as an offensive threat? Does he look more like Mikal Bridges or something next to better offensive players? I mean, I think those are really interesting, legitimate questions on a sample that's not just like a silly 8 games. I know Philadelphia, to your point, is down on talent and not been competitive, but Grimes is like almost playing them out of their top 6 protected pick by getting a couple extra wins with some of these insane explosive scoring games.
Well, this is actually a really interesting point because we just talked about teams maybe ending on a hot streak and maybe it mattering a little bit. I'm thinking about last year. We're going to be able to bring in talking about this guy since he was taken from us way too early this season, but Victor Wembanyama ending last season, right? Like, we were excited about him at the beginning of the season. I think for a period of time, we were actually a little bit more excited about Chet Holmgren. We were like, he's actually outplaying him. This is the rookie of the year. Second half of the season, that completely changed. And when the Spurs ended last season, we were like, oh my God, like, this guy's approaching all NBA level if he's not already at that level. Like, I hope he can carry that over. But then here was the interesting part. We restarted this season, not restart. We started it. We didn't do 2025 twice, just the one time. We started 2025 season once. And when Wembanyama started, we were like, oh, yeah, he's fine. Like, there's nothing too exciting. Maybe 15, 20 games in. I don't remember how long it was. Then all of a sudden it clicked. We were like, oh, this is where he ended off last season. Like, it took a little bit going into this season to see him really, regain everything that he ended the season with. So I think this is one of those things to like put a pin in for somebody like Grimes and be like, is he going to start next season like this? Is this something that he is going to take a few games to ramp up to? And there's definitely going to be an adjustment if there's other guys out there, they're going to soak up a little bit more of the load. So I don't know. I think that would actually be really interesting to go back and see how individual players have ended and how long or if they were able to retain that starting the next season.
Well, I think there's a difference with rookies. Historically, rookies have this aging curve where the end of their first season can carry over into their second season. Dwayne Wade is a great example. 2004, getting the playoff run. Jason Tatum had a similar thing in 2018 with the playoff run, and they carry some of that play level and momentum that they picked up at the beginning of the year into their second season. The interesting thing about some of the guys we're seeing in March this year, and it's not abnormal, we've seen it before, but I mean, Quentin Grimes is not in his first or second season. He's like 25 years old or something. I mean, this is just one of these wild sort of Jeremy Lin out of nowhere kind of situations where you don't expect. I think fans have a good instinct for this. I think fans don't go, oh, is Grimes going to average 30 points a game next year? No, but they go, okay, wait a second. There's something here that we didn't think we had. Jeremy Lin might not be an all-star, but like, oh, I see a starting point guard. Is he pretty good? How good can he be? Another one that we're seeing right now. You mentioned the Bulls. I'm just fascinated by the Bulls as a team since they're like red hot, which is also what's going on in my throat right now. Something is red hot and incapacitating me. Josh Giddey, like what? Cody, have you seen Josh Giddey play? Can you talk about this, please?
That's actually interesting. He's not the first Bull that I wrote down to be interesting. There were a couple other guys that really popped. To me,
what
I kind of thought the Giddey experience was sort of what we saw from Giddey. Like, I don't know if there were new tricks out there. I don't know if there was anything that looked particularly different. It's just maybe things started clicking. Like, he was always an excellent passer. He was always a stout, long defender. He always pushed the ball. I actually haven't looked up his shooting stats.
Yeah, so yeah. Maybe... Wait a second. In the last month, Josh Giddey shooting 51% from three in the last month. He's third in our box plus minus model at thinkingbasketball.net. This is hilarious. I ate something spicy. I feel like I'm on Hot Ones right now. I can't even make sounds come out of my throat. Josh Giddey, third in our box plus minus model. He has a near perfect passer rating, 23 points per 75, plus 8% efficiency in the last month. And the Bulls, this is what's crazy. The Bulls are outscoring teams by 15 points per 100. When he's on the court, he has nearly a plus 20 on off. And yeah, I have to say the last couple Bulls games, I've picked up some second halves and he's putting up these big numbers. And it's like, it looks like the Giddey experience, just all the shots go in and all the passes are like there and sound. And it's like, he plays pick and roll. He can make a beautiful pass. He can make an extra pass. He can make a transition pass. He's playing defense. He's got like 2 steals a game. All of a sudden you look up and it's like Josh Giddey, 18 points, 15 assists, 12 rebounds, 70% shooting. The Bulls are up by 20. And you were probably going to talk about Buzelis or some other player as the most interesting Bull.
Well, I think there are a lot of different Bulls right now that are doing some interesting things. They're kind of a fun team where all of their guys, they're a deep team in terms of interesting people. Let me say that. There are some teams that maybe we'll talk about at some point that aren't deep. Maybe they have 3 good players and that's about it. And everyone else is in denial about the Milwaukee team. I mean, the team that we might talk about. But something about Giddey that stands out in terms of his efficiencies. He's taking, in the last 10 games, 3.5 3-point attempts per game, right? That's not a ton. That's not a huge volume. That's not the reason he's shooting so efficiently. Something that I would like to go back, right? And if this is like a true deep dive, this is a team that, you know, maybe if they have much more of a run towards a playoff spot, I'll look more into it. But Giddey, it always stood out to me, his finishing. He was always maddening to me in terms of like picked up the dribble, like one dribble too early. And he went with these little floaters. And I'm like, go, one more. You're big, you're strong, get some contact, go to the free throw line, finish closer to the basket. And based on his free throw numbers, it looks like he's getting fouled at a good rate. He's making those free throw attempts. So I don't know if that extra dribble is in there right now. I don't know if he's able to do that. I don't know if he feels confident getting downhill. I don't know how he's getting downhill anymore, but I think there's a lot of interesting things about Giddey that I would like to go watch a little bit more. But I'll be honest, Ben, I haven't deep scouted the Chicago Bulls right now.
I love this. This podcast is things we don't know that we could find out. I have no idea how Josh Giddey's shooting 67% at the rim. I haven't seen a Bulls game in 3 months, but I'm fascinated by it. And that is the nature of March in the NBA. Who are you gonna say? Were you gonna say Kobe White? It depends on what game you watched. I guess.
I'm gonna shout out Dalen Terry for a second.
That is so. Come on, yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
he's all limbs going to the rim. He's got the Euro step down. He had a couple nice finishes. He has these flurries where I'm like, wow, this is a nice little piece coming off the bench for them. I don't know. I'm a fan of him. He's kind of popped a couple of these times in terms of his confidence and ability to finish. So that's one guy. I've really liked the decisiveness of Vucevic, right? His ability to kind of play in that middle area, move the ball around, splash some threes when he has to. I never know how good of a shooter Vucevic is. It feels like it waxes and wanes. When they played the drop coverage of the Bucks a few years ago in the playoffs, it seemed like he never missed. So I'm not exactly sure, but right now it seems to be going down. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting stuff. Like you said, Buzelis is an interesting one as well. He had that beautiful, like they're playing the Lakers, crosses over Luka behind the back in the corner and throws down a huge dunk. Like he's just an interesting piece that I'm not sure what it looks like in the future, but when you get to this point in the year in March, you're like, you know what? The Bulls are kind of fun to just toss on and watch right now.
Well, they've won 8 out of 10, and they're in a conference that is very thin after the top couple teams, and they've already sort of made their way up to the 9th position. And I don't know, can they catch anyone else. I mean, they're basically like a game and a half behind, 2 games, behind the Magic. And, you never know what's going to happen with the Magic. The Magic are like trick or treat. One night, Paolo's making like 6 threes in a game. The next night, he's like 2 for 14 at halftime. The Hawks are there. The Hawks are just like, they're just like pesky. They're just like a very pesky team. But I mean, this is March, Cody. This is the nature of March. And I mean, how about, here's another one. The Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets, did they end their win streak finally? They had this huge win streak. Do you remember?
I don't know. I know they lost one recently because they're like 9-1 in the last 10 games.
Yes. Okay. Yes. The Nuggets beat them finally. They had like an 8-game win streak, but every time I watch the Rockets play, now the Rockets fans are going to get mad. Don't get mad. Okay. Your team is still 40. They're still in the second position. What I'm going to say does not invalidate them being in the second position in the Western Conference, which is great. But I watched this 8-game win streak and I'm like, every time they're playing like a terrible team and the game is very close and they look very shaky and the offense is fumbling around and they find a way to win. And I'm like, man, should I be worried about the Houston Rockets? I had this like experience where someone texted me about the Rockets and I was like, yeah, should I be worried about them? And they're like, wait, aren't they a sleeper team? They've won 8 in a row. I'm like, how have what's going on? It's March, Cody. It's the Ides of March. The Rockets have won 8 in a row, but I feel like they're struggling.
Wait, okay, just a sec. I want to nail down something here for a second. What does being concerned about the Rockets look like to you? Like, what are you concerned is going to happen with them?
They won't play as well as they have.
But like, let's be honest. Like man to man right now, no one's listening. Like, you don't think the Houston Rockets are like a championship like contender, right?
No, that was never discussed at any point during the season. Yeah.
So then, like, what does Houston ending on a disappointing note look like?
Well,
like,
I think
they're not gonna make it out in the first round.
No, I think there's two. I think absolutely there could be 2 things that would be disappointing for both the team and their fans who've had a very fun, exciting year. The way this team was working earlier in the season, even if they lose in the first round, which is probably likely depending on their matchup, just because of the other teams in the West. In the East, that's different. If you could get a bunch of teams in the East, I'd pick the Rockets pretty heavily in a series against, like most of the teams in the East outside of the top 3 or 4. But you have the Rockets in the West. What you wanted from them, at least from my vantage point, is you want that dog in the playoff series. You want that playoff series where it's like, yeah, we beat the Rockets. We thought we were going to beat the Rockets, but that was not pleasant. Those were 6 games that we would like to erase from our memory, because having to be hounded by Dylan Brooks and Amen Thompson and Tari Eason and all these guys, Jabari Smith's making big plays and, Fred Van Vliet's hitting threes in big moments or something. Maybe it's a 7-game series. To me, that would be a nice culmination for the Rockets season if it's a case where they didn't actually get to the second round. That's very different than like getting to the end of the year, being in contention for the 2nd or 3rd spot and either falling to like 6 or the play-in, which I think is a very different thing, or getting in one of those playoff series and just sort of tripping and falling on your face. So I do think I think I can have concern, right? I think I can be concerned about a team like that just because they're not in the championship picture.
Okay, that's fair. I'm glad you nailed that down. I wanted to know exactly what it was, because I'm like, are you kind of expecting them to make the like second round or even fight for the conference finals? Because if that's the case, I don't know if I'm quite so high in the Rockets. I really like their tenacity, right? Like their physicality, their depth in guys they can play, the different schemes they can play, like schematically on defense when you come to the playoffs. Like you said, that is a team I don't want to match up against for 7 games. Like that's going to be a really, at least for me, that's going to be a fun series, like no matter who it is that they're going to play. But it's the offensive question, Ben. Like when the other team gets a chance to scheme against you, where's the offense going to come from? And I know Jalen Green has had a spurt of a few nice games. I think he had a 7-point stinger against the Heat, but that didn't matter because they ended up winning. But he's had a couple of 30-point games, high 20-point games, things like that. Not very efficiently. Like Jalen Green isn't generally a very efficient scorer, but he seems to be really the only guy that's going to self-generate off the bounce. I guess Şengün in terms of like post types of actions and running like delay sets and things like that. But I just don't see where they're going to get consistent enough offense to really be competitive going into a second round series in the playoffs.
Okay, let me ask you another one while we stay in the Western Conference.
Well, there's a natural jump from the Rockets. So do you mind if I might jump in and and suggest a team to talk about for a second?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. The team that right now they would be matched up against if the playoffs started, a team that has also been hot the last few games, and that is the Los Angeles Clippers. I think they're a really interesting team right now.
Okay, tell me more. Are you why? What's going on?
So James Harden's looked very solid the last few games. Like this is one of those where I think they're outscoring teams like 13 points or something like that when he's on the court during the last 10 games or so. He's not like the James Harden of old, and defensively, I think at a certain point we said this is maybe Harden's best defensive season in quite some time. He is still a turnstile on the perimeter. He might actually be worse in like one-on-one type of isolation coverages. I don't remember who it was recently, but I clocked like multiple times where he just let the guy like go right by him to get to the rim. But there, like you bring up Ben Simmons earlier, here's the like reclamation project. They're like, hey, we're going to take a chance on you. And they have a few of these guys that are just like elder statesmen. They're all kind of doing their thing. Zubac is huge. He's protecting the rim as well as he does. Great hook shots in the paint. Like he takes down anyone who's not bigger than like 7 foot in the paint. Batum's still 36-year-old doing his Batum type things. Kawhi is all of a sudden like, hey, is this actually like 80% of Kawhi? And if we have 80% of Kawhi, just how good can we be? I know I've had like a rule against talking about the Clippers for a while, but I think they're really fascinating right now, Ben.
Okay, they had won 7 of 8. So they're another one of these teams with a March push, and yet, it's vintage March where you look at it and you're trying to say how good are these wins? In their case, they beat the Pistons, which is a nice win. They beat the Knicks, which is a nice win. Although I think that was, yes, the Knicks were without Brunson. So this is what I mean. Like you look at March and you're like, okay, this is a nice win, but actually this player was injured. This is a nice win against this team, but they didn't have this other guy. He sat out the game for rest or something like that. And that happens at the end of the year. So they beat the Kings as well in overtime. They played the Heat. We got to talk about the Heat. The Heat haven't won a game like since the Carter administration. But then the Clippers had that great win against the Cavs. I thought that was a great win for them. And then they beat the Grizzlies, which is another good one. And then they almost beat the Thunder at home. Very close game. They defended the Thunder very well. I think that may have been the best I've seen anyone defend Shea all year. It might be a fun game to rewatch and scout at some point before the playoffs and really kind of understand if the Clippers present a particular kind of matchup with Chris Dunn on the ball and some of the shading into Shea's driving gaps that they were executing during that game, or if other teams can kind of copy that, because that was the roughest night I've seen Shea have, I think, the entire year. He was 7 of 29 in the game and just couldn't really get to the normal spots that he got to. So again, it's the same thing. Again, we're about to crest into April, and do you look at that and say this is a team that's like getting better? Are they turning a corner? If Kawhi Leonard's 80% of Kawhi Leonard, does it matter? I don't know. I don't really know.
So something else about that Thunder game that really stood out to me is especially that fourth quarter, like the Thunder sicked Alex Caruso and Kawhi. They're like, hey, this is the premier defensive player in the league right now. And we're going to put him on the former premier defensive player on the perimeter in the league. Like Caruso, just take him out. And Caruso couldn't handle Kawhi's strength. Like there were multiple possessions where Kawhi just kind of like Barkley'd him down. Like Kawhi just wants to operate like in that 10-foot radius around the rim and kind of get to like his little turn push shot because his hands are so big. He can do these like little push shots, his little fade, his little step backs from around there. Caruso really struggled against that sort of strength, right? And so, like you say, Kawhi at 80%, but also Bogdanovic, prior to the Clippers, he struggled pretty badly, I thought, with the Hawks. He did not have a good first half of the season when he played. I think he was out for good chunks of it. I think there were some injury concerns there. But recently, he's looked good for the Clippers. The shot's going down. He's a nice second side creator. Norman Powell, we've talked about in terms of like his scoring explosion. I don't remember if we had him as a sub all-star, but he's at least like close to that in terms of like, is it? Yeah.
We were talking about him as an all-star. Yeah.
We
had him as a sub all-star.
So Harden, Powell, Bogdanovic, Kawhi. Like in terms of comparing the Clippers and the Rockets, like the Clippers just have a lot more offensive firepower, a lot more options for being able to get a bucket when the chips are down, basically, to have some kind of offensive flow. But beyond that, they just have some really strong defensive players. I know I just said what I said about James Harden, but everyone else is really good. Chris Dunn will be coming up in an upcoming pod when we talk about the thinkies, right? Ben Simmons, of course, is absolutely massive, and you can just throw him out there on basically anybody. I don't know. I think the Clippers might be the sneaky dangerous team right now if I were to pick one team in the NBA.
I think it's hilarious that about 10 seconds before we started recording, Cody's like, there's a team he didn't tell me who it was. He said, there's a team I want to talk about, but I don't want to get too into them because we're going to do the playoff preview in a couple weeks before the playoffs. And on your own accord, Cody, you just went through the entire Clipper. You just played your hand, man. You've given it away.
I haven't said a thing about Amir Coffey and Derek Jones Jr., so everyone's going to need to sit on the edge of their seats for when I come back strong about those two.
Wait, did you really not say Derek Jones Jr. when you were lauding their defensive stable that they throw at people?
I did not. And I did not bring up a cup of coffee out there either, man. This team
You're going to get hate messages people are going to be on you about this.
No, I'm not saying there's a bad thing. I just didn't say them because I'm holding my hand back, right? I got an ace in the hole here. I'm saving it for... I was going to say the river. I don't know if that's the correct term. I shouldn't make references. I don't know. I love
that.
Clippers
Yeah.
team,
Yeah. Was that a poker reference?
That was a poker reference. Absolutely.
Wow. Look at you. Look at us. Who would have thought we would be here?
That's not a sport though, right? Poker's not a sport.
I don't think it's a sport.
No.
I absolutely do not think it's a sport. One more thing on the Clippers. They've been great at home this year. One of the things we track for our subscribers at Patreon over on thinkingbasketball.net is you can look at the team's performance at home and on the road, and in particular, the net rating of a team at home and on the road. And the Clippers on the road, they're decent. They're getting outscored by about 1 point per 100 possessions, which is like literally middle of the pack in the NBA. But they're the fourth best home team in the league. They're +8 per 100 in their games at home. So that's something to consider for a playoff series where I've been kind of fascinated historically about, like, if you're really good at home, does that help you pull upsets? Because you can like legitimately at home, even against really good teams, you have really good odds to win those games. And then you just have to steal the one on the road. And if you steal the one on the road and you hold home court for 3 games, you get out of there in 6, Bob's your uncle, and you've sprung the upset. But about the Clippers home court advantage. I think, I don't know this, but I would love to hear from other fans. I think they're the only team in the league that has a new arena that has no Jumbotron. There's the center of the Intuit Dome is incredible. It has no Jumbotron. It feels like a stage. It feels like the Coliseum. Cody's, you're looking at me quizzically. What?
They don't have they don't play replays?
Oh, they have the entire upper perimeter is a giant board that plays replays at every different angle. It's kind of spectacular, actually. You get like four or 5 replay angles at a time that everyone can see everywhere they are in the arena. And so it creates this effect of like no Jumbotron. The court feels like it's centered and it's just breathing in its own space. I'm sure this has nothing to do with their home court. It's just fascinating to me. Yeah.
So, we're just trampling all over the preview pod, but whatever. We're doing it right now.
Why are you doing this? Where are you going?
Well, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about it right now, so I have to make the point. It's on the tip of my tongue.
You can't help yourself.
I can't. The Clippers are great, man. So you bring up home court advantage. Ty Lue's their coach. I think their offense underperforms what it can be in the playoffs because of all the offensive stuff that I said before. They're already a top 5 defense in the league. I don't know, man. And I know this is the biggest if in the history of ifs, but like if they can stay healthy and if Kawhi can play more than 3 straight games in the playoffs, like I don't know, Ben.
Can I ask you about the team I was going to ask you before you wanted to do the playoff preview pod in March?
Yeah, who do you want to talk about?
Golden State with Jimmy Butler. What do you make of this?
How am I supposed to talk about them without sounding preview potty? Like, what do you want me to say?
It's March. The team has a completely different statistical profile since Jimmy Butler has joined them. Their record, let's put this into perspective. The Warriors' record on February 6th was 25-26. They're 15-4 since then. So I come back to like March. Is any of it real? I mean, I'll help you out, Cody. Their recent games, they lost. Now Steph Curry didn't play in this game. They lost to the Atlanta Hawks by 9. Mm-hmm. They barely beat the Raptors by 3. They beat the Bucks by 11. So that doesn't really count. They lost to the Nuggets. They lost to the Nuggets without Jokic. They beat the Knicks by 3 without Brunson. You see where I'm going? This is a win streak, but you're like, I can't tell what's good. They beat Portland at home by 10. That's solid. Portland's not great on the road. The Pistons are good on the road. They beat the Pistons by 5. They narrowly escaped the Nets in Brooklyn by 2. And I think they did have a nice win on March 4th against the Knicks in New York City. So, like, what do you make of that? Do you look at that and go, this is one of the best teams in the league? They're legitimately scary. They create these issues. They're, if you stack up how they are in the last month, they're one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the league. I don't know what to make of it.
Podziemski.
Yes. P-O-D. Can you use it in a sentence?
Brandon Podziemski is making lots of threes. Podziemski.
What's the etymology? All right.
So the thing that I've been thinking a lot when I've been watching them is he's been spacing the floor really well. He's knocking down a bunch of threes. And I've been really confused by this because I'm like, well, wait a second. He was terrible at the beginning of the year. Like a Brandon Podziemski 3, like in the first half of the year. Yeah, like you might as well have been aiming for like the crowd. Like that's basically what you were getting out of it. And I just checked. There's a huge stretch. I don't know how many games it is, but it's before his giant inactive streak he has. He's shooting 29% from 3.
This is earlier
in the season, first half of the season.
Yeah.
Second half, ever since that area, he's shooting about 6 3-point attempts per game. He's shooting 37% on them. So the eye test, it actually did something here. I was like, wow, is the Podziemski shooting thing real? I didn't think he was actually as bad as he is. And I think that's a really big key because when you have, especially these games like the Atlanta game when Steph Curry wasn't playing, I'm pretty sure he wasn't playing. He didn't play the second half, at least. When he's not playing, their spacing is pretty rough, right? You have Draymond and you have Jimmy Butler out there. And of course, you have the sharpshooter Quentin Post that might be the best shooter in league history.
Yeah.
And that helps him a lot. But if Podziemski can legitimately be like, I'm going to take 5 or 6 3-point attempts a game and shoot like 36, 37%, that gives them a lot of spacing. So that's one thing I want to see. Like, is this real? Is it going to be closer to 33, 34%? That's the first thing I'm going to say in terms of the Warriors, Ben.
Really? You're not going to go to the fact that in the last month they have, I said top 5. They have the second best net rating at +10 in the league, and they have the number 1 defense in the NBA in the last month by raw defensive rating. I mean, is any of this real?
I think it's real in terms of them being much better after the Jimmy Butler trade.
This might be our best podcast ever. This is a thing that happened. Does it count?
They're definitely better post Jimmy Butler trade. But I think the issue is, like, we look at some of the best teams in the league, the Thunder, the Cavaliers, the Celtics, things like that. They're so deep. And I don't know how trustworthy the depth is for the Warriors. We've talked about the big man rotation in a previous episode. Quentin Post is great. I love watching him come off a pin down and nail a 3, and everyone's like, oh my God, maybe we actually need to defend this guy like Klay Thompson kind of thing. But in terms of other skills, like I don't really trust him doing anything off the bounce. I don't know how much he's bringing defensively, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know how much that matters if you have Jimmy Butler and Draymond out there. But then like the other big men that come in, all of them kind of have like a key weakness that I think you get into the playoffs and that scheme is going to start scheming against them. So I think they're a team that's going to kind of have to play how they play and not be able to adjust. But I don't I don't know what other pitches they're able to throw when the chips are down.
Your brain, this is fascinating to watch. Your brain is just completely wired into scouting for a playoff series. You like can't I literally was asking you what you make of these wins. Are they good wins? Did you watch any of them?
What am I supposed to say? What do you?
I don't know. There's still a couple weeks left of the season.
But okay, no. What does a March analysis look like that's not playoff bound?
Will the Warriors continue to win at the same rate? They have 10 games left, and those 10 games are critical for their playoff seeding, who they match up with, whether they might have home court advantage, which is crazy to say at this point. But, they have 10 games left. Do you think they're going to go like 5-5 if Steph Curry plays? First of all, is Steph Curry even playing in these games? I don't think I saw the latest on him. We should get that. I'm
trying to figure out like who their last few games are. I wouldn't be surprised to see them kind of end on a hot streak like this, like if they ended 7-3 or something like that, 8-2.
So you buy it. You think in other words, you think they'll, playoffs aside, you think this is legitimate regular season stuff that's difficult for other teams to deal with. They'll take the same advantages and they'll ride out the season and finish, 23-6 or whatever it is.
Yes, I absolutely do.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Curry is listed as questionable for tonight's game, which will probably start by the time people listen to this. So this will be a strange conversation from us trying to figure out whether Steph Curry's playing basketball.
Do you know who's a really good defensive player, Ben?
Can you give me a hint? There's a lot of really good defensive players. What team does he play for?
He plays for the Warriors. He's played for the Warriors for like a decade now.
The Golden State Warriors? And he's a really good defensive player. I think they've only had 2 players play for them for a decade, which is Steph Curry and Draymond Green.
Yeah. Can you guess which one's the really good defender?
Where are you going with this?
This is just my analysis right now. Like watching, he's still marvelous defensively.
Oh yeah. So we have another podcast coming up in 2 weeks where we're going to talk about this. Yeah.
That's the thing that really stands out to me though. Like that's the thing that's going to keep holding steady throughout the regular season. Like both him and Jimmy Butler out there. Like the combined defensive IQ is just, it's unbelievable, Ben. It's unbelievable. And the things that Draymond's able to do, playing off a guy, baiting a guy, et cetera, it's wild to me. Here's something that's really interesting about Jimmy Butler. He is so much more decisive without the ball than he is with the ball. Like I'm watching this Hawks game and they're calling on him to do like a lot more isolation type stuff, right? And I feel like there's a lot of plays where like they throw it to him and he's like, he's wide open for 3. And then he waits a beat. And then all of a sudden the defense is set. And then he's like, now I should make my move. And like that kind of thing happens a lot. And I think if you watch Jimmy Butler in those plays, you might be like, oh, this is weird. How does he fit into the Warrior system? But when you have somebody like Steph Curry has the ball or Draymond Green that has the ball, all the other stuff where he finds like the nooks and crannies to like cut to the basket and stuff is so much more decisive. It's really fascinating. I think he would prefer to not have the ball most of the time, I think.
Can we talk about the Heat?
What do you want to say?
No, you're just saying no at this point. Yeah, we went for a podcaster segue, and it's set back in my face.
What do you have to say about Miami?
You were mentioning Jimmy Butler, and the Heat have lost 10 straight games. I mean, so are they just pumping wins into the league? Are they tanking? Are they tanking?
I don't know. Are they tanking? I feel like when I've checked in, like Bam's playing. Terry Rozier thoughts going through some off the court stuff that I haven't really followed, so maybe that's not true. But I think
what?
But I don't think he's playing right now. But they're just so undermanned right now, Ben. They're just so undermanned. Like Bam Adebayo is a guy that is so much better when you have more offensive options around him, right? Like a Draymond Light sort of thing. Like when his weaknesses offensively in terms of wanting to get to that 10-foot area, kind of dribble into it, take a post fade and things like that. It's so much more tough when everyone's relying on you to be like the number one option there. I think defensively, he still looks wonderful, but they're just so outclassed basically everywhere else on the team that I don't know. That's my analysis for them.
Okay. I mean, I mentioned it in jest that they do have Andrew Wiggins. I mean, Andrew Wiggins has been there. Tyler Hero, who cough made the All-Star team this year. Wow. Bam Adebayo, Davion Mitchell, Duncan Robinson, Jaime Jaquez, Khalil Ware. I mean, it's mostly the team, right? Since the Jimmy Butler trade. You're just saying the team itself is under. So, in other words, if we had a full season of this team, you'd expect like 22 wins.
I wonder, how did they perform in that stretch when Jimmy was still on the team, but like didn't play? Do you know?
You mean before he was traded? Are you talking about the games where he was like tanking in those games? That's not team tanking. That's Jimmy Butler trade tanking. That's a whole separate thing.
Yeah. So when he's with Miami, and he was like, you know what, I'm just not gonna play while I hold out here. I don't know how they ended up winning. All right, so I'm looking. It looks like they had a 3-game win streak there. When they weren't great, but they weren't rattling off like 10 losses or something like that. So I don't know. I'm just not sure what's going on with them, Ben.
Someone in our audience we're going to have to trust them because we know nothing about the cap on this show. They are pointing out that this is the best way to have their pick. You know, Miami is going to have the 8th pick as of right now. It's funny trying to figure out sometimes who has their pick and who doesn't have their pick. You know, like we mentioned Quentin Grimes. Quentin Grimes' explosion, that's a top 6 protected pick for the 76ers. So they mathematically, want to keep that pick and not move down to the 7th position and have that pick go to like, I think maybe the Thunder. There's some transfer stuff on that pick that the cap people will know much better than me, but it's crazy. But Cody, I was being a little tongue in cheek about the Heat tanking, but this is a thing that, can I unload something? Can I get something off my chest?
I would love to hear this.
Well, as you know, are you the president of the celebratory committee for the NBA?
We're at least co-presidents. Like, I don't want to say that I have power over you on this one. Yeah.
Okay. As a member of this committee, I like to take on these negative narratives about the league that I'm not sure how much validity is actually behind them. It's not to say that the fan experience, some people like certain things and some people like other things. That's fine. Some people are very, very sensitive to tanking. I don't want to take that away from you. But for me, I've never been too bent out of shape about tanking. And when I look at a season like this, I mean, this is almost like an anti-tanking season to me. If you look at the standings, Utah, we can talk about Utah. Okay. Utah is a team that's done some stuff, and Washington and maybe Charlotte, but the New Orleans Pelicans, I don't even think they have a draft pick to play for. They've been doing everything. Somebody gets injured, somebody comes back. They're playing Zion 40 minutes a game. They've been competing their tails off. They've been trying to do everything. The entire rest of the Western Conference. I mean, Portland went from a classic tank position to why don't we try to get into the 10th seed in the middle of the season? The Blazers have been one of the best teams in the league for the last 2.5 months. The Spurs lost Wembanyama. I think they're 8-9 since they lost. They have kept winning. They're just like, no, we are absolutely going to do whatever we can to be a thorn in your side. We already talked about Philadelphia. I mean, most of the Eastern Conference is in a playoff position. The rest of the Western Conference has 40 wins and is stacked. It just seems to me that a lot of the things happening in terms of pumping wins into the league or trying to make sense of what the heck is going on in March is injury related, or someone's sitting out a game or something because it's 4 games in 5 nights. The Lakers have had this weird schedule stretch from when we had the fires a couple months ago, and they had to reschedule games. And I can't remember what it is, but it's five games in 8 days or just something crazy. So I feel like it's not a tanking thing. And yet every time I open up something on Reddit or social media, it's like someone's like, how do we fix tanking? I'm like, what, why are we talking about tanking? Anyway, that's my rant.
This is so interesting to me. I don't want to say I was called out, but I was sort of called out on the most recent upload for our what's this thing called?
This is a podcast. Yeah. Although after today, we might have to call it something else.
Yeah, brilliant. I don't know what else to call it, but when we uploaded that one, I made a comment
reintegrated
on that podcast. I made a comment about this not being a particularly toxic MVP race. And I think the most liked comment underneath that was like, I don't know how you think it's not toxic. It's been terrible out there. And I think that just speaks to how unplugged I am from any sort of discourse. So you brought this up to me yesterday. You were like, hey, we need to talk about the tanking thing. I'm like, what are you?
I think I brought this up to you 4 weeks ago because everywhere I go, people keep saying, how do we fix tanking? I'm like, what's going on? I forgot to mention, Cody, the league changed the lottery odds a couple years ago, and that they flattened out these positions. And so it isn't like do or die for one win. And I think that's been successful. You see that with teams. They don't really care about 17 versus 19 wins or things like that.
This is actually interesting. Can I call out somebody in the comments? I'm not going to use their name, but I just want to, they know who they are.
Now's the time. I mean, we're at the end of the show. Now is the time. Yeah.
So this person that's commenting makes a comment that
is he in the audience right now, or are you talking about in another show?
Is he in the room with us right now, man? So this individual is saying that the Sixers are, for lack of better word, are kind of being stupid and not tanking a little bit more.
That's not unique to someone in this room. I think that's the universal. Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of reject that notion, right? And I think I don't know. I'm a purist in the sense that you lace them up. You go out there. I don't care if you're at the park. I don't care if you're an NBA team that's about to lose your pick. You go out there to win. And I think that's the spirit of basketball. And if you follow the spirit of basketball, there's some kind of universal basketball gods thing that will make all of the balance work all together. I don't know. It's a lot of mumbo jumbo to basically say that I don't believe any team should ever tank. But I think in terms of what you're saying, it doesn't seem like there's this big systematic tanking mechanism that's happening in the NBA right now. It seems like, I'm not going to call it any teams, but there may be a team or two where it's all right, it seems like you're definitely not doing your best to win this game. But I don't know if you can point to too many examples and be like, aha, this team is clearly tanking right now. And I kind of think that's your point about what's going on at the end of the season.
Yes. Well, not only that, but I wonder if stuff is being conflated heavily with injuries and just, if the season's like 10 games less, you don't have this sort of, and when we're in March, it's March, Cody, just weird, wacky stuff. It's like Dana Carvey, just weird, wacky stuff is happening in March. That's a Saturday Night Live reference. Sorry, I wasn't saying Dana Carvey. Cody's like, what did Dana Carvey ever do to
I thought
you?
you were making a Master of Disguise reference.
No.
I thought you were a big Master of Disguise head.
No. But I wonder sometimes for the people, if you're like really anti-tanking and this is a hot button issue for you and it bothers you, if it's the actual game you're playing in, to your point, or if you count tanking as something like what the Jazz have done, where I feel like Danny Ainge is just like, whatever happens, we can't have decent players out there for the coach to actually win off like 30. We cannot get stuck in the treadmill of mediocrity. Do not even flirt with 35 wins, sir. Like, don't even. You're out. You're traded. You're traded. You're traded. You're traded. I want 19 rookies out there for you. This way, nothing can go wrong. I mean, if you count rebuilds as tanking and this kind of like avoiding the middle of the NBA, then I would argue that every good, smart team has been tanking for decades because the incentive structures of how to win make it very difficult to just sit at 40 wins and like not play for the future. In other words, not do rebuilds, not have certain contracts where you say, hey, I want assets for 2 or 3 years down the road. I want draft picks that I can actualize. I want expiring contracts, all these things. I think the economics and the rules of the game set themselves up for teams to go up and down depending on the stars that they have. And personally, I don't know entirely what's wrong with that. The Oklahoma City Thunder just pulled off a masterful rebuild where 4 years ago they won like 20, 23 or 24 games, but they had a lot of young, exciting players. People were writing articles about these young, exciting players. 3 years ago, or I guess 2 years ago at this point, it was 40 wins and they missed the playoffs. And we maybe would have liked to have seen a young core get to the playoffs. Last year, it was 57 wins, and they got to the very suspenseful second round, great back and forth series against Dallas. And this year, they're pushing 70 wins. I mean, I don't think you can do it much better than that, but that's part of the up and down cycle of the league, I think.
So you're almost differentiating between these two types. There's like the tanking where you try and lose at the game level, but then there's like this bigger tanking where it's like these other kinds of moves you're doing are setting yourself up so that you don't ultimately lose.
I'm suspecting people are putting those. I'm suspecting that people are putting those two things together. Maybe they're not, but I just don't see a lot of tanking at the game level. With the exception of like Lauri Markkanen has a back injury, and he plays 50 games instead of, I don't know what he would play if they were one of the top seeds, 60 games. I don't know how we can know that number, but I think the way people talk about it, if you didn't know that much about the sport, if I was trying to explain it to my wife or something, I'd be like, yeah, Lauri Markkanen played 8% fewer games because the team was like, we're not in a good position and maybe losing helps us. So we don't need to push your injury. So you hurt yourself. It just doesn't feel like a significant thing. And yet there's so much talk about it. So, yeah, I don't know if you have other thoughts on this.
I wonder if there's a conflating of any player sitting for any team, because maybe you rope in like some of these high level teams where players maybe kind of injured and they're like, what, maybe you sit this one out or something like that to really get this rest in the middle of the season here. And then when that happens combined with somebody like Lauri Markkanen sitting out, it's like, oh my God, all these teams are tanking, because in your mind, you're just thinking about all these teams that are sitting somebody. That would be interesting to see. Like if you look at teams with certain records, are teams in the lower tier of records actually sitting their guys more or longer than teams that are higher up? But then again, like you said, it's tough to prove the legitimacy of a certain injury and stuff like that. So I'm not really sure. It feels like it's a nice argument you can make in March because it's not necessarily provable or disprovable, so you can say it and then people are like rallying behind it, because that's what we like to do. We like to rally behind some kind of opinion, and we want to see people play basketball, Ben.
To support us, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. It's where we have the extra content that I've alluded to, our stats board, our leaderboard, teams and players throughout the year. Patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. You can also get just the video component and live stream the podcast to join our audience on YouTube if you want to be a member on YouTube only. Cody, I do have one more question about tanking before we get out of here. You said that you think the spirit of the game should always be to try and win.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put on let's pack our philosophical pipes and smoke it for a second. Why do you have to try to win only the thing in front of you? Why can't you set yourself up to win in the next season?
Interesting.
Let's take Philadelphia, right?
Yep.
Philadelphia is in an extreme situation where they're not trying to move up one spot for a draft pick. They either get a top 6 draft pick, which is incredible, or they don't get a draft pick at all, which is a disaster, and give that to a much better team. The top 6 draft pick clearly would give them a better chance to win next year and potentially for 10 years. Why would you try to win one game to move up in the standings in 2025 when you can win hundreds more games in the next 10 years?
I feel like listen, nothing in this world is forever, Ben, right? Like all you have at a certain point is the here and now. And I'm not saying that like take that trip, like dump your savings, stop putting some stuff into your retirement fund. Like that's not exactly what I'm saying, but it just feels like one of those things that like if you're out there and you have the guys, like you should go out there and try and play this game because that's the game that people have. You know, there's the economic part, right? People have paid money to go and watch and enjoy that particular game. They want to see people participate and compete at the highest level. But also you like, it's owed to the players themselves. Like if this is a message that's being pushed down and be like, hey, maybe we're going to take it easy this game. That's not fair to the players that are going to go out there and like give it their all. They've worked their entire lives to play this particular game. And if you're going to go out there and not give it your all, like you don't know how long that NBA career is going to last. You don't know what's going to happen where all of a sudden your fingers snap and it's like, maybe I don't have that other chance. So sure, maybe that works in terms of like looking at it from a team level, looking at it from a general manager type of level. But from like a player level, like at a certain point, you're just like, here's the game that's in front of me.
Right. But I think I don't think anyone is saying the players on the court don't try hard. I think the allegations are about sitting players and, shutting players down and, maybe even larger things like trading out talent so that you stay at the bottom of the league. I hope we would all agree that when the guys go out that like tanking is often levied against teams that throw out lineups with players you've never heard of. But of course, the lineups with the players you've never heard of play the absolute hardest. That's the Quentin Grimes scenario. The 76ers have players most people have never heard of, and Quentin Grimes is dropping 40 a night because he's like, this is my chance in life. There's millions of dollars at stake for me. I don't think would you agree with that? I don't think many people are saying the players aren't trying, if that's what you're.
No, that's 100% correct. Like players are going out there to try, right? But like even taking the players' opportunity away to play a particular game if they're able to play, like that in itself feels like you're taking away a moment from somebody. Because again, you don't know how many NBA games you actually get. You don't know how many minutes you get out there. So the whole premise of it, like I get what you're saying in the long term, like you're trying to do some kind of utilitarian type of thing here where it's like, actually in the long term, we're going to get more wins out of it.
But I don't even see it as very utilitarian. I think it's just basic strategy. Why would you only telescope on a scenario where you like have no shot of really winning anything material? So you're like, 2 or 3 games higher in the wins-loss column, but in the long run, you kind of nuke yourself.
But like this feels like, what's the word I'm trying to like? I think what you're making is a very sound economic argument, right? Like if we're actually going to put together a strong case about why it is smart to lose this game, sure. Like I think that makes sense. I'm not going to be able to puncture a hole in it, but I'm coming at it from like the poetic sense, like the fact that you're going to go out there and it's like, hey, we have a team, like we have fans out there they're going to watch. We're going to go out there and we're going to give them the best competition and game we can get because we owe it to the fans, we owe it to the players, we owe it to our organization for having this team. That we're going to put the best product out there that we can. That's the argument I'm making.
Don't you think the fans are rooting for the team to get the pick though?
I mean, maybe, but that still feels icky, right? That feels it's icky. I use the word icky a lot because
I don't think we have enough time. Yes, I don't think we have enough time to unpack that. There's something deep going on there that it's offending your sensibility. It's offending the fan gods in your mind.
Well, there's something. Like, I don't know. I feel like, and I'm not able to think of it right now. I don't know if I've ever said this, but somehow about like having a child has reduced my capacity to think on the spot like 70%. Like my intellect is just gone.
Yeah, that tracks.
It's gone. Everyone can attest to that. Whoever's listened to the last couple of years. But I feel like there's some kind of hypothetical situation that you could come up with about what a team could do to try and secure as many wins in the future. That if I proposed it, you'd be like, oh, that's wrong. That's not a good moral choice to do. And I'd be like, why not? It's going to help them in the future. So I think I don't know, that it's tough to come up with a fake hypothetical like
It
that.
feels like a deal with the devil for you.
Yes, I think it's a good way to say it.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
This is a great question from our audience. Joseph George is asking, the Spurs shut down De'Aaron Fox. Cody, do you remember this?
Okay.
They shut him down with he's going to have surgery, or he already had surgery, to repair a tendon in his hand, but he injured that tendon in like the preseason, so he was just playing through it. Mm-hmm. And I think the decision to shut him down was influenced by Victor Wembanyama's injury. Mm-hmm. So a similar thing. We're not really going many places this year. Maybe we pack it in. Maybe we give some of the young guys more reps. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I certainly might be abnormal in this regard as a fan. So I'm certainly not speaking for other fans. Like I said, I think if more people feel the way you feel, then I'm not trying to invalidate it. It's a very interesting thing to explore. But to me, it doesn't instinctively feel like the deal with the devil that you're talking about. If you say, again, like, I want to invest in my future, I want to think about next season. I've got these, like, there's trade-offs everywhere. Think about a team like Memphis. Memphis last year had all these injuries, right? Mm-hmm. Now, should they have gone out and tried to trade future contracts and players and young players to get veterans who could patch up the bleeding on the team so they would still make the playoffs and be in the 9 seed? Is that what they should have done? Or was it suddenly an opportunity to try to develop players, say Jaren Jackson Jr.? We've never had this situation where you can have the ball all the time. We need to give you on-ball reps to develop your playmaking so you see different reads. That comes to fruition in 2025. G.G. Jackson, Vince Williams, maybe you have opportunities. Maybe there's a diamond in the rough we can find, a Quentin Grimes situation we can find. Like, to me, it just seems like these are natural opportunities. But you're saying, there's an ickiness to it.
Well, okay, let's go to the Fox thing. I think the more interesting question is, should he have even started playing the season? Right? Like, if it's bad enough that he's getting the surgery now and he's going to recover from it, like, what is it saying about having him play, like, when he is injured that severely, right? So that's the first thing I think of. Like, maybe it should have happened sooner, and maybe that's the question we need to be asking about, like, what are we pushing some of these guys to play through, sort of thing, right? In terms of what the other situation is, I feel like that fits in perfectly well with this philosophy, right? Like, you don't have to go and, like, buy a bunch of stopgap players. You don't have to go sign them and be like, hey, show up to my team so we can perform a little better. It's like, hey, here's our team right now. Because of these unforeseen circumstances, this is the hand that we've got dealt. So we're going to go out there and see what happens. And of course, some guys are going to develop. I think that's totally fine within the confines of this philosophy.
So would you shut down Fox, or would you shut down Embiid in Philadelphia, or would you just try to grind out, whether it's, because it sounds like you're saying whether it's 15 wins or 35 wins, like, the philosophy is play for every win.
The philosophy is that at the health of players, right? So if somebody like Fox or Embiid is at the point where it's like, this is actually better, like, for you health-wise to get out of here, not for some kind of, like, we're going to land a better draft pick or something like that, then that's totally okay, right? I'm not saying that, like, everyone has to be a Spartan out there and play 48 minutes a game and, like, run themselves into the ground to win everything. Like, there needs to be the confines of, like, you have to watch out for yourself as well.
This isn't a Knicks podcast, Cody. Yeah.
They don't all have to be Josh Hart in the playoffs, Ben. They don't all have to put up Wilt minutes per game numbers.
Well, I appreciate you going through that philosophical exercise with me. I mean, I think we put a lot of burden on you trying to represent the more typical fan compared to my experience, because I've never seen tanking as that big of. I think there were a couple years where it got a little, teams were like competing and tanking. That's when they changed the rules. Like 7 or 8 teams were like, we need like one extra draft pick. And that always cracked me up, because I'm like, you can't even draft the right player in the 6th spot. What makes you think you're going to get the right player in the 4th spot and pay him more money? But I just think in general, it feels like we're in a good place with this. And I don't know.
I think what you've brought up and what makes it really interesting is there are a bunch of these little cases where you can bring up and say, does this actually count as tanking? Does this count as, like, being morally reprehensible to Cody Hodek's, like, philosophical take on basketball? I think that requires a little bit more sitting down and thinking through all of it. And then you talk about injury cases. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, I'm also not the player. I don't know how these people feel. Like, even if Fox had the same injury right now as he did at the beginning of the season, like, you know, as well as like I do, even as not a professional athlete, you have an injury and you play through it, it gets worse, right? That starts getting into your head. Okay. So maybe this is a thing where it's gotten worse, and I can't comment on that because I don't know. So I think there's too many extenuating circumstances for that to really be a legitimate hypothetical situation, a thought experience, I should say.
Well, I'm sure no one in the comments will have any opinions on this whatsoever. But hopefully I feel like I've gotten off my chest. I've unburdened myself of my angst about everyone talking about tanking during this spectacular basketball year of 2025, where Luka Doncic was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers for no reason.
I'm gonna respond. Now I'm fired up, Ben. Let's keep this running for the next hour.
What? I have to go. What's going on?
This individual in the comments just said, grinding for wins only matters if it gets you somewhere. Grinding just to miss the playoffs? ?
That's right. Yeah.
The somewhere's getting you is the respect of the game, right? The sport was created to go out there and play with the hand that you're dealt and to try your best to win. There's no getting somewhere. Like, this is the Pinterest. I don't know if Pinterest still exists, but it's like, it's about the journey, not the end. That's what basketball is about, then. You're out there, and each individual game matters, not just the finals. Not
Cody's camera's shaking. This is amazing. So this sounds like you are really on board with sort of the Chicago Bulls team building philosophy of just like never always exist between 35 and 48 wins, just like no matter what. You like Nikola Vucevic, he's got weaknesses, bring him on board. Fantastic. DeMar DeRozan, let's get 5 of them. We'll put them on the same team. It doesn't matter as long as we are trying our hardest.
I mean, okay. So I think you're conflating what I'm saying with making moves that don't necessarily make sense, right? Like, you can respect the spirit of winning and still have a bad team.
But doesn't it not make sense to lose your draft pick?
Wait, what are you saying there? How does that relate specifically to the Bulls?
Oh no, I was thinking of the Philadelphia example we were talking about earlier. But you're saying I'm conflating free agent or personnel moves that aren't ideal for team fit, and that may be true. But I'm saying, how is that different than not developing future players? How is that different than keeping your draft pick if it's a top 6 draft pick and losing it because you win like one extra game that just doesn't make sense to win?
I'm going to be honest. I'm not following your point here. I think we got too many teams and mixed metaphors and things here that I'm not following exactly what you're saying.
It's okay. It's okay. We should wrap up the show.
Yeah, I think we should too.
It's been a long day. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. And of course, we hope you're having a great day.